I'm Allison Reed, 31 years old, and I always knew I was the quiet one in the family, but it wasn't until my sister's wedding that I finally understood what that really meant. I was sitting at the back of the ballroom, nowhere near the family table, when my mother raised her glass and said something I'll never forget. She looked straight at my sister and toasted the daughter who truly deserves everything. I didn't flinch, didn't cry. I stood up, lifted my own glass, and said just 6 words. And those 6 words, simple as they were, cracked the mask my family had worn for years. Before I go any further, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. And if you've ever felt like the odd one out in your own family, hit that like and subscribe button. You're not alone. I grew up in the Beacon Hill neighborhood of Boston, the kind of place where brownstones stand 3 stories tall, and everyone knows which family owns which house. My parents, Margaret and Daniel, took pride in appearances. My mother believed in polished manners, matching holiday outfits, and always having fresh flowers on the table. My father was a partner at a private investment firm and rarely made it home before dark, but when he did, his glass of scotch was already waiting. My sister Caroline was 3 years older than me, and she fit into our world like she was born to lead it. Blonde hair, blue eyes, and a laugh that seemed to pull attention toward her without even trying. By the time I was 10, the house already felt like hers. The living room walls were covered in her framed certificates, debate wins piano recitals, her early acceptance letter to Princeton, while my report cards and school art projects were quietly stacked in a drawer. I did well in school, mostly A's, some B's. I found my rhythm in computers and design, but that wasn't what my parents noticed. "That's nice, sweetheart," they'd say, already turning back to Caroline's next speech competition. The first time I remember feeling it, the distance was on my 7th birthday. My mom had promised me a small party with a few girls from school, nothing fancy. But when Caroline made it to the state finals for soccer that same weekend, the plans were scrapped. No party, no reschedule, just a single frosted cupcake the day after her team won. For Caroline's 16th, they shut down a restaurant and hired a jazz band. For mine, Mom forgot to order a cake and picked up one from the grocery store, the kind with frosting so thick it peeled off in chunks. My name was spelled wrong on top, Allison with a Y. Still, I kept showing up. Every softball game, every Sunday dinner, every family photo, I did my part, and I didn't complain. I earned a scholarship to Northeastern for graphic design, graduated with honors, and built a steady career doing what I loved. Bought my own condo by 28, which in Boston felt like a small miracle. But none of it counted. Not to them. Not really. When Caroline got engaged to Nathan Parker, the son of a commercial real estate developer, my parents lit up like it was Christmas morning. Finally, Mom said, clutching her pearls at the dinner table, the wedding we've always dreamed of. And I remember wondering, did she realize I was sitting right there? From that moment on, Sunday dinners turned into wedding planning meetings. I listened to conversations about florals and seating charts that never once included me. When I tried offering ideas, Mom brushed them off. Caroline didn't even pretend to listen. And 3 months before the wedding, I found out I wasn't even in the bridal party. I only found out because I saw an email thread about dress fittings. My name wasn't on the list. I asked Caroline gently if she'd forgotten to include me. She tilted her head and smiled, said she just wanted her closest friends standing with her. When I asked Mom, she placed her hand over mine and said, "Allison, don't make this about you. This is Caroline's moment." It was in that kitchen, our family's kitchen, where something inside me started to shift. The years of swallowing it, of nodding and going along, of telling myself it didn't matter, it all came to a stop. I told myself I'd go to the wedding anyway, be polite, keep my head down. But what happened at that wedding changed everything. I arrived at the Four Seasons just after 8 that morning. The sky was cloudless, and the air already warm, one of those rare June days in Boston that made everything feel polished and bright. The lobby smelled like gardenias and fresh linen, and the doorman greeted me with a practiced smile as I stepped inside, carrying my garment bag over one shoulder and a small tote in the other. Upstairs, the bridal suite buzzed with motion. Hairspray, curling irons, soft jazz from someone's Bluetooth speaker. My mother was at the window watching for arriving vendors. Caroline was settled in front of a vanity, sipping a mimosa through a straw and chatting with her college roommate. I'd barely set my things down when she handed me a steamer. "Amanda's dress is wrinkled," she said without looking up. "It's silk. Be careful." Before I could answer, she turned back to her conversation. I carried the lavender gown into the next room and plugged in the steamer, giving myself a few seconds to breathe. When I came back out, Caroline was laughing about something the makeup artist had said. She pointed at Amanda's lashes, joking about whether they'd survive the afternoon heat. I waited until the laughter faded, then handed her the dress. Her eyes moved to a faint crease along the hem. "Maybe someone else should do this," she said, tugging it out of my hands. "Silk's delicate." I nodded. Didn't say anything. Around noon, someone from the hotel brought in lunch for the bridal party, a tray of mini sandwiches, fruit, and sparkling water. I reached for one, and Caroline slapped my hand, half laughing. "That's for the bridesmaids," she said. "There should be snacks in the other room." There weren't. I checked. The mini fridge had a few bottles of warm water and a can of ginger ale. I ended up buying a protein bar from the vending machine downstairs, sitting on a bench near the elevator and trying not to think about the day ahead. Back upstairs, things were tense. Caroline didn't like the shade of her eyeshadow. She snapped at the stylist, then made one of the bridesmaids cry because her curls were too tight. My mother stepped in, offering soft reassurances and gentle corrections, brushing hair off Caroline's shoulder and calling her princess like she had when we were kids. I kept my distance. Just before 2, I went into the suite to grab my phone charger. Caroline's purse had tipped over on the vanity makeup tissues, and a small leather-bound notebook spilled across the marble. I recognized it. It belonged to our father. He kept records from the firm, in it client notes, meeting logs, wire transfer details. I paused, then opened it. Inside were pages of printed bank statements, numbers highlighted in yellow, transfer records, names I didn't recognize, dozens of deposits into offshore accounts. The handwriting in the margins was Caroline's. I took photos with my phone page by page, hands shaking just enough to blur one of the shots. I retook it, then tucked the notebook back exactly where it had fallen. Carolyn's phone lit up on the vanity. A text preview popped up. "Can't wait to see you tonight, beautiful. Room 718 after the reception. I've got our champagne. It was from Marcus Bennett, Jason's best man, Caroline's ex from college." I took a screenshot, then 2 more just in case. I didn't react, not out loud. By the time guests began arriving at the ballroom, the Seaport Hotel had been transformed into something out of a magazine spread: white roses, glass candles, sheer silk tied into bows along every chair. A string quartet played softly as people took their seats. I was placed in the last row. I scanned the room. My parents were near the front, seated beside Jason's family. My aunts and cousins were lined up across the second and third rows. Caroline's friends, the ones who'd been in and out of our house since we were kids, filled the bridal party. 8 of them, all in lavender. Not me. The woman beside me leaned over and whispered, "Aren't you the bride's sister?" I nodded. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing else. The ceremony started on time. Caroline came down the aisle on our father's arm, wearing a Vera Wang dress with crystal detailing along the bodice. Her hair was pinned up, her makeup flawless. Guests murmured. Someone behind me let out a soft "wow." Jason smiled when he saw her. I watched his face carefully. The vows were personal and polished, the kind you could tell had been rehearsed. The room clapped when they kissed. Then the music changed, and guests were ushered into another ballroom for cocktails. At the reception, I found my seat, table 19, near the kitchen doors, partly blocked by a large floral arrangement. I sat beside a man who used to work for my mother 20 years ago, and a cousin who called me Carolyn's little sister twice in 5 minutes. Across the room, my mother adjusted Caroline's veil, refilled her water glass, signaled for more wine. No one looked at me. No one asked how I was doing. The meal was 5 courses: lobster bisque, filet, Chilean sea bass. The wine flowed freely. But at my table, the conversation stalled after dessert. No one knew why they were seated with the sister of the bride, and I didn't offer a reason. I slipped away as they cleared the plates, stepping into a quiet hallway with my phone. I opened the photos, scrolled through them slowly: bank records, account numbers, screenshots of texts, the plan for room 718. I added the newest screenshots I'd grabbed when Caroline left her phone on the table during cocktail hour. They were clear, undeniable. I knew what I was holding. I looked at the time, 45 minutes until the cake cutting. Then I returned to the ballroom and took my seat. Guests were laughing now, clinking glasses. The DJ was setting up his playlist. The photographer circled the dance floor waiting for the cue. Caroline sat at the head table surrounded by everything she'd ever wanted, but not for much longer. The DJ made an announcement about the cake, cutting his voice bright and cheerful, as guests turned their attention toward the center of the room. Caroline and Jason stood behind the tall 6-tier cake, their hands gently overlapping on the silver knife. Flash bulbs sparked. The photographer crouched into place. Then one soft chime, followed by another. And then a sudden wave of alerts, phones buzzing, pinging, lighting up across the ballroom like a ripple across water. At first, no one spoke. Then a voice from table 3, sharp and confused. What in the world? Chairs shifted. Forks paused midair. I sat still watching as people glanced down at their screens. Jason's mother, who'd been smiling just moments before, went pale. She looked at her phone, then slowly at Caroline. Jason's father stood, eyebrows drawn tight. He showed something on his screen to his wife, and she pressed her fingers against her mouth. Caroline looked around confused. "Is everything okay?" she said, voice light, trying to keep things moving. "Let's cut the cake, shall we?" That was when Marcus, the best man, stood up from the head table. Not casually, not for a toast. He grabbed his jacket and headed straight toward the exit. Jason turned, calling after him. Marcus' more phones chimed. More faces dropped into silence. Jason's own phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, read the screen. His hand fell away from Caroline's. "What is this?" he asked, holding the phone in front of her. "Room 7118. Tonight." Caroline blinked. "What are you talking about?" Jason's voice dropped steadier now. "Messages, screenshots. You and Marcus. Plans for tonight." The room hushed. Even the DJ lowered the music. Caroline stammered something about a prank, a misunderstanding. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Jason didn't respond. He turned the phone again, showing her the messages. "Is this a prank too?" he asked. "The money transfers. Hundreds of thousands from your father's firm." My father stepped forward, slow and deliberate. "Caroline, we need to talk now." She didn't move. She looked between Jason, my parents, the Blackwells, the dozens of guests now reading the same email at the same time. "This is ridiculous," she said loudly, waving her arms. "Someone's trying to ruin this day. The bank statements are time-stamped," Dad said, "and they're signed. With your name, your login credentials. There's nothing fake about it." My mother had been quiet until then. She looked at her phone lips slightly parted, One hand gripped the edge of table 1. "I can explain." Caroline tried, but Jason cut her off. "Explain what?" "That you've been lying to me, sleeping with my best friend, stealing from your father's company." Jason's mother turned away. His father stepped in front of them both. "We're done here," he said. "Our attorney will be in touch about the annulment." Caroline reached for Jason's arm. "Please just listen." He didn't. Behind them, Marcus had been caught near the exit by 2 of Jason's cousins. They led him back, his jacket half-buttoned, his expression pale. Jason moved toward him. "You were with her?" he asked. Marcus didn't answer. That was all Jason needed. One punch, swift, clean, landed square on Marcus's jaw. The best man stumbled backward, catching himself against a table before security stepped in. The room erupted. Some guests left quickly, grabbing purses and jackets. Others stood rooted, whispering, exchanging stunned glances. The cake, untouched, stood at the center like a monument to a celebration that would never finish. Caroline turned toward me, her eyes locked onto mine. "You," she hissed. "You did this." She moved like she might come at me, but Dad stepped between us. "That's enough," he said, his voice low. "You've done enough tonight." "She's always been jealous," Caroline shouted. "She's bitter, she's small, she's nothing. She wanted to ruin this, because she can't stand me being happy." My father didn't move. "What you have," he said, "is a $2 million problem, and a public scandal you brought on yourself." The room went silent again. Someone near the back gasped. My mother sat down slowly, her hands trembling as she clutched the hem of her dress. "There must be some mistake," she whispered. "Caroline wouldn't—" "The transfers are real," Dad said flatly. "The text messages are real, the signatures, the accounts." Security escorted Marcus out the side door, and Jason's family followed close behind. Caroline's face shifted from fury to panic, then something else entirely. Her chin trembled. "Daddy, I was going to pay it back," she said. "I just needed more time." My father shook his head. "For what?" "Caroline." "A lifestyle impressing the Blackwells." Caroline turned to Mom. "You understand. You always said it matters how we look, what people think." "Not like this," my mother whispered, still seated. "Not like this." My sister didn't answer. I stayed at table 19 while the ballroom emptied. Silverware clinked. A server stepped lightly between tables, collecting half-finished wine glasses. The DJ had stopped the music completely. Caroline stood in the center of the room in her custom dress hair, slipping from its pins, makeup streaked at the corners of her eyes. She looked around, and for once, no one looked back. A staff member approached quietly, his voice polite. "Excuse me, miss. The ballroom's closing for cleanup." I stood, gathered my things without speaking, and made my way into the hotel lobby. The space felt cold after the noise and movement of the reception. Somewhere near the elevators, I heard my father's voice, firm, low, deliberate. They were standing near the entrance to one of the side lounges, my parents and Caroline. Her dress was still perfect from a distance, but up close the beading had started to pull near the hem, and one of the rhinestones from her hairpiece hung loose behind her ear. Dad looked over when he saw me. "We're going to step into a private room," he said. "You should come too." The Wellington suite was quiet. Just a conference table, upholstered chairs, and a tray of untouched water glasses left from a previous event. Someone had turned off the overhead lights, leaving only the warm glow from a lamp in the corner. Caroline waited until the door clicked shut before she spoke. "How could you do this to me?" Her voice cracked on the last word. "You ruined my wedding. You ruined everything." She moved toward me fast and wild, but Dad stepped between us. "That's enough," he said. "Sit down." "I should have known," she hissed. "It's always been you, watching, waiting. You couldn't stand that today was mine. I didn't answer. I just sat in one of the chairs near the end of the table. You think this makes you better than me? She said. You're not. Dad turned to her. No one said anything about being better. But the facts are what they are, Caroline. There's money missing, and it traces back to you. I was going to put it back, she said quickly. I just needed time and access. To $2 million, he asked. That's not borrowing. That's theft. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. Jason's family expects things, the clothes, the trips, the appearances. I couldn't show up with a handbag from last season and be taken seriously. My mother stayed seated. Her eyes were unfocused, fixed on a spot on the carpet near the edge of the table. You always said we had to look like we belonged. Caroline continued, turning toward her. Don't act like that wasn't part of it. Mom finally blinked. Not like this. What was I supposed to do? Caroline asked. Jason doesn't notice anything. He talks about office towers and tennis matches. Marcus at least understands how the world works. You were married for 6 hours, I said quietly. She snapped her head toward me. None of this would have come out if you hadn't done what you did. I didn't steal the money, I replied. And I didn't plan to meet someone else the night of my wedding. You did that part all on your own. Caroline's voice dropped to a mutter. You've always wanted to take me down. Dad stood up. That's enough. He looked at me, then at Mom. This is where we are now, he said. The Blackwells are gone. Marcus has been escorted off the property. The guests have all left. There's no way to undo any of it. So we're going to deal with what's real. He turned back to Caroline. First thing tomorrow, you'll return every dollar. We'll work with the firm's legal team on how to make that happen. Her chin trembled again. You're throwing me to the wolves. I'm protecting the business. And the people who trusted us with their savings. That includes you even now. You're not in handcuffs, Caroline. Be grateful for that. Mom finally stood. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. We can fix this. Can't we? Dad didn't answer right away. Then with his back to her, he said, The damage is done. Caroline looked down at her hands. What about me? She asked. What am I supposed to do now? You'll figure it out, I said. You always do. She didn't reply. I rose and walked toward the door. My hand touched the knob when Mom's voice called after me. You don't get to walk away like this. You humiliated this family in front of everyone we know. I turned. No, I said. Caroline did that. I just made sure it couldn't be hidden anymore. Dad stepped forward. Why today, he asked. Why here of all places? I looked at him. This man who had always nodded at my successes like they were pleasant but unimportant. Because Mom raised a glass, I said to the daughter who truly deserves everything, while I sat with people who didn't even remember my name. Nobody spoke. A few seconds passed in silence. Then Dad nodded once. You've made your point. I opened the door. I won't be at Sunday dinner. As I stepped into the hallway, he called after me. Allison. I stopped, turned. I'm sorry. It wasn't much, but it was something. I nodded. Me too. And then I walked out, leaving the ruined wedding behind, not sure what would come next, only that it would be mine to decide. 3 days after the wedding, I walked through my front door with a bag of groceries and set them on the counter like it was any other morning. The sun filtered through the kitchen window, quiet and gold, hitting the edge of the hardwood floor in a way I'd always liked. My condo wasn't big, but it was mine. Clean lines, warm colors, books on the shelves that I'd actually read. It smelled like rosemary and fresh coffee. I stood there for a minute longer than usual, listening to the stillness. It didn't feel like running away. It felt like arriving somewhere I hadn't let myself live before. The city outside kept moving. Boston commuters hustled across intersections. Buses hissed along their routes. Someone 2 doors down was walking their dog in slippers and a Red Sox hoodie. Life as always went on. I turned on my laptop, opened the browser, and started sorting through emails from work. Campaign metrics, creative approvals, a few quick check-ins from clients I liked and trusted. Then I opened a blank document. No subject line, no salutation. Just a space to breathe. And I wrote, "I will not ask permission to be seen." I didn't know why those words came first, but they did. That afternoon, I took the long way home from my appointment across town. I stopped at a bakery on Charles Street, the one with the pistachio croissants and lemon-glazed scones. There was a young couple at the table beside me flipping through house listings on an iPad. Across from them, a woman my mother's age sat alone with a crossword and a cup of Earl Grey. No one knew who I was. No one cared what happened at the Seaport Hotel. The city had already swallowed it up like a passing storm. I finished my pastry tipped well and headed back through Beacon Hill on foot. My shoes clicked lightly over the cobblestone. I passed our old block. The house still had the blue hydrangeas out front. Same brass knocker, same stiff curtains in the parlor window. I didn't stop. That Friday, I canceled my recurring Sunday dinner RSVP, just unchecked my name in the group thread without explanation. No one asked why. Later that evening, I took myself out for dinner. Just me. No one to dress for, no one to impress. I brought a paperback and ordered a glass of red and a steak salad. The waiter asked if I was celebrating anything, and I said no. But after a pause, I added, "Just a fresh start." He smiled. "That counts." I nodded. "Yeah, it does." When I got home, I lit a candle and pulled a wool throw over my lap. I hadn't realized how often I'd been holding my breath until I wasn't anymore. The next morning, I went through a box in my closet labeled Photos, Family. Inside were snapshots going back to childhood, school portraits, birthday parties, a Polaroid of Caroline and me in matching Easter dresses, mine a little wrinkled around the collar, a graduation photo, not mine, hers, with our parents on either side, all three of them beaming. I sorted through the stack, kept a few, let the rest go. By Monday, I'd signed up for a weekend retreat in Vermont, just 3 days. Nothing dramatic. Hiking, journaling, shared meals by a fire, the kind of thing I never gave myself time for before. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I just packed a duffel and left. Out there in a lodge surrounded by pines, I met women whose lives didn't revolve around making others comfortable. Some were divorced, some widowed. A few had adult children they spoke about with equal parts love and honesty. No one knew me as the lesser sister. No one compared me to Caroline. On the final night, we sat in a circle with mugs of peppermint tea passing around a smooth stone carved with the word choice. Each person spoke when the stone reached her hands. When it came to me, I looked at the etching and said, I used to think keeping peace meant staying quiet. But I don't think that anymore. I passed the stone along. That trip didn't fix everything. It wasn't supposed to. But it was the first place I'd ever stood without shrinking. When I returned to the city, the messages started coming in. Not many, just enough to notice. One from my father asking if I wanted to meet for lunch. One from my mother, shorter. Thinking of you. Call when you're ready. Neither one mentioned the wedding. Or Caroline. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I rearranged my living room. Ordered a new rug. Bought myself flowers at the corner market just because I liked the color. Small things. But they mattered. 3 weeks after the wedding, I was pouring coffee into a chipped ceramic mug when my phone buzzed with a notification. I'd silenced most alerts by then, news apps, social media, anything that might stir up more noise than I was ready for. But this came through as a text from a former coworker. It read, "You seeing this? Caroline's name is trending. Boston Business Journal. I didn't answer right away. I walked over to the window, watched the branches shift in the wind for a minute, then finally opened my laptop. The article was near the top of the homepage. The headline was brief. Investment firm confirms internal financial irregularities. Client funds recovered quietly. It didn't mention names. Not directly, but it didn't have to. The details were unmistakable. A mid-sized family-owned investment group in Beacon Hill. Over $2 million misappropriated through unauthorized transactions by a senior marketing consultant. The company had initiated full reimbursement procedures and secured written compliance from the individual responsible. The article included a short statement from my father's firm. Nothing emotional, just facts, dates, outcomes, a careful assurance to clients that every cent had been restored. By noon, the whispers had moved past the business press and into Boston's more social corners. Society blogs, private Facebook groups. An email thread forwarded from one of my mother's charity circles ended up in my inbox by dinner time. The subject line was Allison Reed's Fall from Grace. I didn't open it. The next morning, my father called. "I'd like to see you," he said, "if you're willing." We met at a small cafe in Cambridge one I used to walk past in college. He arrived early, already seated, already sipping black coffee from a white porcelain cup. His tie was loosened, and he looked older than I remembered, more tired in the eyes. "Thanks for coming," he said, standing just long enough for a quick greeting. I sat across from him and folded my hands in my lap. He cleared his throat. "It's been a long few weeks." "I read the article," I said. He nodded once. "We handled it quietly, or tried to. The server came by and poured me water. I asked for tea. I didn't want her arrested," he said. "That was never the goal. But I couldn't ignore what happened. She signed an agreement, yes, legal and binding. We liquidated her condo and most of her assets. Everything went back into the firm's books. There's still damage, of course, but nothing that can't be repaired." We sat in silence for a moment, the cafe filled with soft clinking of dishes and murmured conversation. "She's living in Brooklyn now," he added. "Took a job at a friend's agency. Smaller role, different pace. And the Blackwells, they've cut ties." The annulment went through fast. Jason's back at his family's firm. They're protecting him, which I respect. I stirred a packet of honey into my tea. "She blames me," I said. "She blames herself, too, though you wouldn't know it to hear her speak." He leaned back, resting both hands on the table. "I've had to look at a lot of things I didn't want to see, not just what she did, but how we got there." I didn't answer. I waited. "I missed a lot, Allison," he said. "Things I should have noticed, things I did notice and let slide because it was easier. With Caroline, it was always about smoothing the path." I looked at him. "And with me," he let out a breath, "I didn't know how to reach you. You didn't need smoothing. You handled things. Quietly. That's not the same as being okay. I know that now." He pulled a small paper bag from under the table and slid it toward me. I opened it. 2 pastries from my favorite bakery. "They said the lemon is fresh today," he said. "I remember you always liked that one. We didn't talk about the wedding, or the toast, or what it had felt like to sit alone at a table no one else wanted. But he asked if we could start meeting once a month, nothing formal, just a standing lunch. I said yes. The next day my mother called. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. Her voice was soft. "Hi, I'm down in the Cape for a bit, just getting some space." I didn't say anything right away. "I've been seeing someone," she continued. "A therapist. She says I might have a tendency to over-focus on appearances." I said nothing. She said I might have pushed certain values too hard, and maybe shaped my daughters in ways I didn't understand. Still, I didn't speak. "I don't know how to fix this," she said, "but I'd like to try." There was a long pause. Can we meet sometime? Just coffee. Neutral ground. I agreed. We met 2 weeks later at a bookstore cafe halfway between our neighborhoods. She wore a scarf I hadn't seen before and ordered chamomile tea with a small splash of cream the way she always had. We kept things light, talked about weather, books, a new bakery that had opened near her condo, but at the end she reached across the table and touched my hand gently. "You didn't deserve how I treated you," she said. "None of it." I didn't answer, but I didn't pull away. By the time the leaves started turning along Commonwealth Avenue, most of the chatter had quieted. Caroline's name no longer showed up in the news. The headlines had moved on to newer stories: elections mergers, a restaurant fire in Back Bay. But among the people who moved in my parents' circles, the silence said everything. The firm released a second statement in early October, short, careful, written by lawyers. They confirmed all funds had been recovered, that no legal action would be pursued at this time, and that new internal controls had been implemented. It didn't mention Caroline by name. It didn't have to. My father handled the cleanup himself. He held meetings with key clients, explained the safeguards going forward, and reassured them that their trust had not been misplaced permanently. According to the business newsletter I still subscribed to, most of the firm's major accounts stayed. A few didn't, but no lawsuits were filed. Caroline returned every cent. The condo she used to boast about in Beacon Hill was sold off quickly, cash buyer, no haggling. Her car went next, then the jewelry. Most of it had been financed anyway. The account she opened in Brooklyn wasn't public, but I heard from someone who'd heard from someone that she was renting a modest apartment just off Flatbush Avenue and working for a boutique marketing firm owned by a college friend's husband. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a job. We didn't talk. At Thanksgiving, her seat at the table was empty. My father carved the turkey like always. My mother set out the same crystal serving dishes. But there was a quiet at that meal I hadn't felt before. Not tension, just a kind of space where something used to be. "She's spending the holiday with a friend," Mom said, when I asked carefully, not saying who. I nodded. That was the end of it. Jason hadn't spoken to anyone in our family since the wedding. I heard through a distant cousin that he was traveling with work and had bought a townhouse in Wellesley. The Blackwells kept things quiet, no interviews, no public statements. But they made their point clearly. Every connection to our family was cut. As for Marcus Bennett, he disappeared entirely. Someone mentioned Chicago. Another said D.C. I didn't follow up. What surprised me most was how quickly it all settled into a new kind of normal. My father and I met for lunch each month. Always the same place, always the same booth near the back. He asked questions about my work, now real questions. He'd started reading about digital marketing enough to ask what a bounce rate was and whether I liked using heat maps in web design. Once he said, "You were always ahead of us." We just didn't know what to look for. It wasn't an apology, but it landed. My mother called sometimes, usually in the evenings. Our conversations were still careful, still surface level. But there was something softer in her tone, something more willing. She'd started talking to a counselor weekly. Occasionally, she would reference something she'd learned, like how perfectionism could become a shield, or how guilt often masquerades as control. We met again in person before Christmas. She gave me a scarf, hand-knit soft gray wool simple. No designer label, just a tag that read, "Made by Alice." "I took a class," she said. "It helps." I thanked her. She didn't try to explain more. Meanwhile, I kept building my own life. I launched a side project I'd been putting off for years, a small freelance platform helping women-owned businesses with digital branding. It wasn't flashy, but it felt good to pour my energy into something I'd chosen myself. A friend introduced me to a nonprofit that helped women returning to the workforce. I started volunteering twice a month, helping with resumes and LinkedIn profiles. On a cold Tuesday evening in January, I ran into one of Caroline's old bridesmaids, Emily, the one who'd once ignored me at the bachelorette party. She was standing in line at the wine shop flipping through her phone. She looked up, blinked. "Allison?" I nodded. She hesitated. "I didn't know. I mean, after everything. That was a lot." "It was," I said. She glanced around, then leaned closer. "I've known Caroline a long time. I think some of us just didn't see it, or didn't want to." I didn't respond. She was always the one who made the rules she added. We just followed them. The cashier called her forward. She gave me a small wave as she left. I didn't wave back. That night I walked home beneath bare tree limbs, my hands deep in my coat pockets. The wind had a bite to it, but I didn't mind. My street was quiet. My condo window glowed softly from the light I'd left on. I let myself in, set my keys on the dish by the door, and exhaled. Whatever came next, I knew it wouldn't look like the life I'd been raised in. And I was ready for that. Spring arrived slowly in Boston that year. The snow melted in patches along the sidewalks, and the bare trees outside my window budded with the soft green haze that always felt like a promise. One Saturday morning, I opened the windows in my condo for the first time in months. The breeze carried the scent of damp earth and something faintly sweet from the bakery downstairs. I brewed a cup of tea, wrapped myself in a cardigan, and sat by the window with a book I wasn't reading. I was just watching the morning unfold. 3 months had passed since Caroline's wedding, since the reception that never quite finished, and the toast that rewrote everything. Things hadn't returned to how they were, and I was grateful for that. Caroline and I still didn't speak, not out of anger, just distance, like two people who had lived through the same storm from opposite sides of the glass. I knew she was rebuilding. I hoped in some quiet way that she was learning something true in the process. My father had kept our lunches going. They were quiet, steady. Sometimes we talked about work, sometimes about nothing at all. But he showed up. And for the first time in my life, I believed he saw me clearly. My mother took longer. She still carried herself with that practiced grace, but something had softened around the edges. She apologized once plainly without ceremony, and we left it there. We met sometimes for coffee, sitting side by side on a bench at the conservatory or by the harbor. Some visits were easy, others weren't. But we kept meeting. What surprised me most was how unremarkable life looked from the outside. There was no grand transformation, no sweeping change. But something inside me had shifted for good. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped asking for a seat at tables that never wanted me there, and I started making space for things that made me feel whole, friends who listened without comparing, work that challenged me, and quiet mornings like this one where nothing needed to be earned. One afternoon, I ran into a woman from the volunteer group. She'd just landed a new job after months of searching. We hugged and she said I almost gave up. "But you reminded me I could start again." I walked home that evening thinking about how many versions of ourselves we're allowed to become if we stop waiting for permission. Caroline's wedding was supposed to be her perfect day. Instead, it became the day I stopped disappearing. And no one, not even my family, could take that from me. If you've ever felt overlooked, if you've spent years trying to prove you matter to people who never really saw you, just know you're allowed to stop trying. You're allowed to take up space. And starting again doesn't have to look like anyone else's version of success. Sometimes it's as simple as speaking up even when your voice shakes. Sometimes it's as quiet as walking out with your head high and letting the silence say what needs to be said. Thanks for staying with me through this story. If any part of it reminded you of your own journey, I'd love to hear it in the comments. And if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe. There's more ahead, and I'd be honored to share it with you. Take care of yourself. You deserve to be seen.